All right, just a little review of the last lesson. We talked about the social disorganization theory, high population turnover in areas that have high crime, high poverty rates, more social isolation, few connections, fatherlessness, weak schools, less religious influence, and that certainly is got a lot of interesting things that have impact on crime. I just want to share you one little thing here as we finish that up. So this is violent crime by neighborhood in Chicago. Chicago is one of the most violent cities in America. And you could see how many violent crimes happen per 100,000 residents. And obviously, the red areas have the highest rates of violent crime. Over 4,000 people out of every 100,000 will report a violent crime in the year 2005. And you notice that I've highlighted one area called East Garfield Park, which has one of the highest crime rates, violent crime rates in Chicago. So in a city that has high crime, this is like the area that's really the epicenter of it. And I want to show you some pictures from this. This is the pictures of neighborhoods from East Garfield Park. And you could tell like it is very run down. The social disorganization here is huge. And the theory would be that this poverty, this rundown buildings, all this stuff contributes to more and more dislocation, less isolation. I mean, more isolation, more people who don't know each other, and therefore even more crime, especially among youth. All right, so there's that. Another thing you'll notice here, this is a zone of male delinquency, which is a kind of an older term, just kind of meant like boys who commit crime, like juvenile delinquent, if you ever heard of that phrase. And it was in Chicago, 1925 to 1933. And you could see that, like in the city center, near Lake Michigan here on the map, go to the left, the rates of crime among or delinquency was higher. So notice like 7.9, 8.9, 9.8. And then as you move away from the city, the violent crime rate and male delinquency among youth drops. And that's pretty typical. Usually crime is highest in the city areas. And as you move out into the more rural areas, it's much less. And so there is the social dislocation in a poor, rundown area is going to be much worse. Therefore, crime's higher, as the theory would go. Again, all right. Let's look at a new one. So this one is social learning, and this is kind of like the B.F. Skinner conditioning theory of crime. It's by Ronald Akers. It's more recent, 1973. And the idea is this: is that people develop motivation for crime. So people develop motivation for crime and the skills to commit crime through the people they associate with. So basically, the idea here is that it's kind of peer pressure. Like if what's the old theory? Like one bad apple ruins a bushel. Like that's this theory. So it's less about like rundown buildings and poor areas and fatherlessness, and it's like who you hanging around. Are you hanging around people that do bad stuff? Then guess what? You'll do bad stuff, right? And now, again, like I said, there could be truth in this. There could also be truth in the other one, right? Maybe it's multiple factors. Okay. Remember this: Akers. Akers is the guy who came up with it. It's who you associate with. Akers associate. Who do you associate with? Akers' theory is that's why you commit crime. A little bit more in depth about this before we finish. All right. So his idea is this: people learn criminal behavior from watching those around them. Okay. People learn criminal behavior from watching those around them. Now, the interesting thing here is we can't push gender out of the way here because the reality is that you could have a boy from one environment, a girl from the exact same environment, and the boy will take part in the crime and the female won't. As again, I said, violent crime mostly is a male thing. 95% of male crime, violent crime is male. So this is an interesting theory, but gender throws it on its heel a little bit. It's watching those around them day in and day to day in their lives. So if you're hanging around people who commit crimes, you're around people who steal, the more likely you're going to steal. Just like we've talked about in psychology, that if you grow up in a family and people are like use drugs and they're alcoholics, like you're more likely to be influenced by that and therefore grow up and have trouble with that. And then here's where we get into the B.F. Skinner kind of classical conditioning sort of idea is that behavior is reinforced socially. So people encourage you to commit crimes, and therefore you start taking part in it. And this can happen very young. When you're talking about gangs in urban areas, this could happen at a very young age, as young as, upper, middle, elementary, and in middle school years. And this is by Skinner called this, by the way, operant conditioning. And then the strength of criminal behavior, like how much you do it and like what sort of crimes you commit, is based on the frequency of the reinforcement. So how often do you have peers encourage you to like do it and cheer you on, if you will, and celebrate your crime? Well, then that's how much more crime you'll do. Whereas by yourself alone, you probably won't do as much crime. See, so it's this social reinforcement that is a problem. That's why gangs are a real big part of like developing crime or criminal behavior as you get older. And lastly, I already mentioned this. I just mentioned it. Gangs socially reinforce criminal behavior. So that is the theory behind the social theory behind crime. Acres associate who you associate with determines how much crime happens. All right, so there's another theory. Good, we got it. Go do your practice.